Picture this, it's just after midnight. You're driving alone on State Road 2080, the only road that cuts straight through the Ebersberg Forest, from the town of Ebersberg over to Schwaberwegen. On either side of you, nothing but spruce trees, dead straight, lined up in rows, because this forest was laid out 200 years ago on a strict square grid. There are 90 square kilometers of darkness around you. And on not one of these 90 square kilometers does a single house stand. Your radio hisses with static. Your headlights cut 2 cones into the fog lying over the asphalt. You haven't passed another soul in 10 minutes. No car, no light. And then you see her. At the right-hand edge of the woods, level with a small white chapel, a figure is standing. A woman, in a long, pale gown. She's waving. Not frantically, not in a panic, slowly, as if she has all the time in the world, as if she's been waiting for you, here and alone. And now you have 2 seconds to decide. Do you stop? Maybe she's broken down, maybe she needs help. Or do you put your foot down? The locals will tell you both are wrong, because if you stop and don't go to her, she'll look for someone else. And if you flee, she's suddenly sitting beside you in the passenger seat, taking the wheel with cold hands, steering your car into the nearest tree.
Tick, tick, down the hall. Great tales, call it by name. Great tales, shadows remain. Tick, 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 time keeps its stare. Great tales, something is there.
Welcome back to Great Tales. I'm Chris and it's good to have you here. For the last 3 episodes, we've been far away, in the Carpathians, in Romanian villages, in Hungarian castles, with the Strigoi, with Vlad, with the Blood Countess. Today, we're coming home to Bavaria, barely 40 minutes east of Munich. And I promise you, what happens here, in a perfectly ordinary commercial forest, is in its own way more unsettling than anything we dug out of the Middle Ages. Because today we can do something we never managed with any others of these older creatures. We can watch a legend being born. With all the others, we had to dig back through centuries, through chronicles, pamphlets, court records, until we reached the source. Today, the source is within reach. We can say almost to the decade when this ghost came into being. We can see which separate pieces it was assembled from. And we can ask why here? Why now? Make yourself comfortable. Pour yourself something nice. We're driving into the woods. The legend. Let's start with what people have to say. The White Lady, so the story goes, is the restless spirit of a woman who died a violent death in the forest. The most common version runs like this. A woman was cycling through the dark stretch of woodland at night. Level with the Hubertus Chapel, she was struck by a car. The driver fled the scene. He left her badly injured at the roadside, and she bled to death there in the night, all alone in the middle of the forest. Some tellings make her the mother of 2 small children. Others go further and turn crueler still. The driver got out, dragged the still living woman deep into the undergrowth to cover up the accident, and then he took the wrecked bicycle with him. She died there, hidden under branches, and no one ever found her. And so she searches. She searches for help, for her killer, for some kind of reckoning. And whoever fails to help her, say the darkest versions, is marked for death himself. And there are 2 ways she shows herself. In the first, she appears suddenly inside the vehicle itself, grabs the wheel, steers the car into a tree. In the second, she waves at the roadside, signals you to stop, gets in without a word, rides along for a stretch, and then simply vanishes, mid-journey, gone from the passenger seat as if she had never been there at all. So much for the legend. And now comes the part you know me for. We test it. When did this woman die? That's where the trouble starts. Some sources date the accident to around 1940. Others say it's all much younger, that it emerged in the 1990s at the earliest. Half a century apart. Even the date of death of a ghost said to have walked here for generations can't be pinned down. And that's not a minor detail. A true event has a year attached to it. A legend's year drifts. So we look where a real woman would have left traces. In the records. And there, nothing. No entry in the regional police files about such an accident. No abandoned bicycle at the roadside. No mother of two who suddenly vanished without a trace. No body in the forest. Nothing. The woman whose terrible death the whole legend revolves around never existed in the documented world. And yet, this is the point. The story lives. And how it lives. Online you'll find dozens of videos, music clips, homemade horror shorts in the style of the Blair Witch Project, supposed pieces of evidence, pseudo-documentaries dressed up to look like serious science programs. There are forums where people report sightings, will-o-the-wisps, inexplicable apparitions around the chapel. There's even a small German web series in which a YouTuber sets out to investigate the legend and promptly disappears into it. The German TV show Welt der Wunder listed the Ebersberg Forest as one of the 10 creepiest places in Europe. And in real life, locals strive to stretch more slowly at night, take a detour of several kilometers rather than risk it, or wouldn't get out of the car at the Hubertus Chapel after dark for anything in the world. A dead woman who never existed, and an entire district that takes nightly detours because of her. How can that be? To understand it, we first have to understand the place, because this forest was a place of death and the supernatural long before anyone ever spoke of a white lady. The forest. The Ebersberg Forest is no ordinary wood. At around 90 square kilometers, it's one of the largest unbroken forests in Germany, the largest in the entire southern German lowlands. And here's the remarkable thing. Across that whole expanse, there isn't a single settlement. No villages, no farms, no light, only trees. For centuries, it was a sovereign hunting preserve, the lordly game reserve of Ebersberg Abbey, a forest where ordinary people had no business of being. In 1817, a large part of it was enclosed with an oak fence and declared a game park, a fence refuge for wildlife nearly half the size of the whole forest. And in the 19th century, the dead straight spruce monocultures were planted that give it its eerie, uniform appearance to this day. Let me stay with that appearance for a moment, because it matters more than you'd think. The foresters carved the woodland into strict grid numbers, numbered compartments of each about 19 hectares, divided by ruler straight cut lanes. Drive into that at night, and you see the same thing in every direction. Straight trunks, equal spacing, no landmarks, no end. It's a forest that looks as it was designed by a computer 150 years before computers even existed. And that monotony, remember it, will play a decisive role by the end of this episode. There's a telling quality to this forest, by the way. It swallows things. In the 1960s, a particle accelerator was meant to be built here, right in the middle of it, a forerunner of what later became CERN at Geneva. In the 1970s, they wanted to drop Munich's new major airport into it. Both plans collapsed, both vanished again, and the forest closed over them. A place where even mega projects sink without a trace into the dark. A vanished cyclist fits in almost seamlessly. But beneath this geometric surface lies something far older. Scattered through the forest are extensive fields of burial mounds, some with finds from the Hallstatt period, the early Iron Age. The dead were lain here for nearly 3,000 years. Cutting across the area too is a preserved stretch of the Roman road from Augsburg to Wels. People passed through this forest, died and were buried here long, long before the first chapel ever stood. And then there's the founding story itself. The name Ebersberg comes from the boar, the wild pig. According to legend, around the year 880, Count Sieghard of Zempt built a castle here and built it directly over the den of a boar, a spot the local peasants venerated. So there was a pre-Christian cult site here, a holy place of an old faith. In 934, Sieghard's descendants, the Counts Eberhard and Adalbero, founded a monastery on this spot. And in one surviving founding legend, a rooster appears to the Count in a dream, transforms into a poor shepherd, and instructs him to build a house of God here, on the very spot where the peasants still worship the boar's den. Christianity overriding paganism, precisely on the holy ground of the old cult. Always the same pattern. A new faith plants itself into the sacred sites of the old. And it gets better. The monastery's first provost, a man named Hunfried, brought back a relic from a pilgrimage to Rome, a gift from the Pope himself. Half the skull cap of Saint Sebastian. The other half, they say, is venerated to this day in Soissons in France. And Sebastian is no ordinary saint. He is the plague saint above all others, the patron invoked against the pestilence. Around this half of a dead man's skull, one of the most important pilgrimages in southern Germany took shape. For centuries, thousands came, sick, desperate, terrified to death, to pray to a fragment of bone for deliverance from the plague. They even offered the pilgrims a consecrated Saint Sebastian's wine meant to cure disease. Put it all together, a forest over a pagan boar cult, Iron Age burial fields, a Roman road, a monastery with the skull of a plague saint as a magnet for the doomed, a place that swallows entire mega projects, and in the middle of it, on the lonely road, a chapel dedicated to Saint Hubert, the patron saint of hunters, the man to whom, according to legend, a stag appeared during the hunt with a glowing cross between its antlers, an apparition in the forest that changes a person forever. This place was steeped in death and in apparitions before the first car ever drove along the 2080. If a ghost wanted to be born anywhere in Bavaria, it would be here. And then in 2009, there really was a fatal traffic accident in the forest. Remember that too. We'll come back to that. But before we go on, I have a small request of my own. If you're enjoying this episode, please leave a comment and a like. I always love reading from you. And of course, I'd be glad if you'd subscribe to the channel, if you haven't already. But enough from me and back to the story. The Great White Lady. Here comes the first big twist, because the woman in the Ebersberg Forest is not a new invention. She is the youngest offshoot of a family many centuries old. The White Lady is one of the best known figures in German and European legend. Full stop. The most famous of them all is the death omen of the House of Hohenzollern. Her legend begins in the middle of the 14th century at the Plassenburg fortress above Kulmbach in what is today Upper Franconia. In 1340, Count Otto of Orlamünde dies there. His young widow, Kunigunde, falls in love with Albrecht the Handsome, a burgrave of the House of Hohenzollern. Albrecht is said to have remarked that 4 eyes stood in the way of a marriage. He meant his parents who opposed the match, but Kunigunde understood something else. She took the 4 eyes to mean her own 2 small children, a girl of about 2 and a boy of about 3 years old. And in the crueler version of this legend, she kills both of them, driving a needle through their heads, a method that leaves no visible wound, so that the murder goes undetected at first. A fatal misunderstanding. Albrecht sees through her all the same and turns away from her. Kunigunde, consumed by remorse, is said to have ended her days as a pensioned in a convent. Legend even has her crawling there on her knees. But her spirit, so the story goes, returns, and from then on the White Lady appears to the Hohenzollerns to announce the death of a family member. And she didn't stay in Kulmbach. She was seen in the Berlin City Palace at Hohenzollern Castle and in the new palace at Bayreuth. Across 3-4 centuries, from the 15th into the 18th, she was sighted again and again. The descriptions are uncannily alike. A woman in a long white gown with a white hood and her widow's veil thrown back, walking the corridors at night with a slow, solemn step. Whoever meets her and greets her receives a slight bow of the head in return, but she never speaks a word. And there is a disturbing detail. When the death she announced is especially near and especially terrible, she's said to appear not in white, but in black. The folklorist Johann Georg Theodor Gresse collected her stories in the 19th century in his book Legend Book of the Prussian State. The Berlin author Oskar Schwebel devoted an entire work to her in 1878, The Legends of the Hohenzollern. There is even a competing theory that the White Lady is not Kunigunde of Orlamünde at all, but Perchta of Rosenberg, a Bohemian noblewoman of the 15th century from Schaumburg Castle who married into the Hohenzollern orbit. And she isn't even confined to Germany. In Vienna in Austria, a white lady is linked to the Habsburgs. In the Czech lands, she haunts old castles as a guiding spirit. In France, she's known as the Dame Blanche, a pan-European figure who wears a different mask in every region. What unites these figures is a precise image. A woman in white, silent, a harbinger. Sometimes it's a avenger, but almost always a messenger of death. And when we dig deeper still, it gets genuinely old. Many folklorists see in the White Lady an echo of the much older pre-Christian figures, of Frau Holle, of Perchta, that alpine winter goddess, half kindly, half terrible. Jakob Grimm himself, in his Teutonic mythology, described these white female figures who walk between the worlds. Because white, in many European cultures, was not only the color of purity, but also the color of death, of bone, of the burial shroud, of the world beyond. The White Lady is, if you like, the threshold between life and death made flesh. Keep that in mind. An ancient messenger of death in a white widow's gown, walking the castle since the Middle Ages. And now, let's see where the second part of the Ebersberg story comes from. The car, the stopping, the vanishing from the passenger seat. The woman by the roadside. Because the White Lady explains only half, she explains the ghost. She doesn't explain why the ghost hitchhikes and grabs the wheel. A medieval castle countess didn't have a car. For that, we need a second, entirely separate storytelling tradition. Folklorists call it the Vanishing Hitchhiker. It is one of the best documented modern legends in the world. The American folklorist Jan Harold Brunvand made it famous in 1981 with his book The Vanishing Hitchhiker. And that book founded a whole field of study devoted to modern legends, to the kind of chilling stories we each tell each other today around the campfire, in the schoolyard, online. The pattern is always the same. A driver picks up a hitchhiker at night, often a young woman, often on a lonely road. She's quiet, pale, sometimes strangely cold. And at some point mid-journey, she's simply gone, vanished from the seat. Later it turns out the woman died years ago in an accident at that exact same spot. The driver gave a ride to a dead woman. And this story exists all over the world. In Chicago, she's called Resurrection Mary, a girl said to hitchhike along Archer Avenue after a fatal car crash in the 1930s. Always near a cemetery, always in a pale dress. In Mexico and the American Southwest, she merges with La Llorona, the weeping woman who lost or killed her own children and wanders the night wailing. In France, she's the Dame Blanche, the lady in white, who appears at dangerous curves and bridges and grabs the wheel. Notice anything? Grabs the wheel. The White Lady. A woman who killed her children. A dead mother. A pale figure on the roadside. All of it, piece by piece, is sitting inside the Ebersberg legend. And that's exactly what's so fascinating. The White Lady of the Ebersberg Forest is not a single ghost. She's a fusion. She is a fusion. She takes the ancient German messenger of death in white. She takes the international vanishing hitchhiker. She takes the dead mother motif from La Llorona tradition. And she takes the phantom accident side. And then she welds them all into a single local figure on a single Bavarian forest road. This is how migratory legends work. They travel as a general pattern around the world, bodiless, placeless, and then they land somewhere, acquire a chapel, a road number, a mother of two, a specific hit and run, and suddenly they sound like a true event from right here, like something that really happened to a colleague's uncle's neighbor. And here comes the new element, the one that sets this legend apart from all the others. In the old days, stories like these traveled slowly, by word of mouth, over decades. Today, this happens in months. The internet is an accelerant for folklore. Someone shoots a shaky phone video at the chapel, someone cuts a little horror film, someone posts a supposed eyewitness account in a forum, and with every click, every comment, every reshot clip, the woman becomes a little more real. Folklore studies even has a term for it: ostension. It means that people don't just tell a legend, they act it out. They drive the 2080 extra slowly at night. They stop at the chapel. They go looking for the White Lady. And in doing so, they keep the story alive and write its next chapter. The legend is no longer merely told. It is walked, driven, filmed. It has, in one observer's words, long since become a digital reality. But why does any of this work? Why does a modern rational person in a car with a smartphone and anti-lock brakes suddenly believe there's a woman in the fog? There is an explanation. And it is, as always with us, unsettlingly sober. The explanation. Let's start with the will-o-the-wisps that the forum reports mention so often. Will-o-the-wisps are not superstition. They are a real phenomenon. Over damp, marshy ground, and the Ebersberg Forest has ponds, boggy spots and wet hollows, the decomposition of organic matter can produce gases, methane and phosphorus compounds that glow faintly or ignite. Add to that rotting wood with bioluminescent fungi that glimmers in the dark, and the eyes of animals, deers, foxes, owls, throwing back the headlights as cold points of light. A faint hovering light in the fog that seems to move is therefore not an invention, it's physics. But our brain turns that light into a figure. And that brings us to the actual machinery, pareidolia. This is the brain's tendency to recognize faces and figures in random patterns. We are evolutionarily primed in the half-dark to see a human or a predator one time too many rather than one time too few. Mistake the rustling bush for a bear and you live. Mistake the real bear for a bush and you don't. This results to us rather seeing one too much. A bank of fog rearing up in the headline beam, a pale wildlife crossing post, a wind-stirred branch caught in a bright reflection. On a long, ruler-straight, monotonous forest road at night, alone, tired, the overstimulated brain effortlessly shapes all of it into a waving woman in white. And then there's the factor that's the most dangerous and the most suppressed: monotony and fatigue. Remember the square grid? The endless identical rows of spruce? A dead straight uniform stretch through the same forest over and over, no curves, no houses, no variation, produces something called highway hypnosis, a trance-like drowsy state in which the brain switches to autopilot and perception takes on a life of its own. At microsleep, the driver drifts off, the car wanders out of its lane. At the last moment, he jolts awake and yanks the wheel. And in that very moment of fright, as the brain gropes desperately for an explanation for what nearly just happened, the story is already waiting. Something grabbed the wheel. The White Lady did it, not his own exhaustion, her. And now the circle closes with the detail I've drawn your attention to twice already. The real, fatal accident in the forest in 2009. These things happen on lonely, monotonous country roads. Again and again, for exactly the reasons I've just described. But once it has happened, it works like proof. You see, says the legend, she takes her victims. And more than that, a real corpse finally gives the story a body it never had before. A legend without a victim acquires one after the fact. Yet the casuality is precisely the reverse. The ghost doesn't cause the accidents. The conditions that cause the accidents, fatigue, fog, monotony, darkness, isolation, are the exact same conditions that produce the ghost. The White Lady and the real accident have the same mother. And her name is not vengeance. Her name is human perception pushed to its limit, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the forest. Conclusion. And with that, we arrive at the real point of this episode. With all the figures we looked at, the Strigoi, the German Nachzehrer, Vlad, Bathory, there's always a source at the beginning, a monk, a printer, a court record, a document from some Habsburg desk. We had to dig back through centuries to see how a human being or a fear was turned into a monster. The tool was always the story, the source, the old paper. The White Lady of the Ebersberg Forest is different. She's the only ghost in this entire series whose birth we can watch in almost real time. We have no body, no file, no accident that was ever reported. We have an ancient German messenger of death. We have an international legend of the Vanishing Hitchhiker. We have a forest that has reeked of death and apparition since the Iron Age. And we have the internet, which stirs all of it together, multiplies it, and ties it to a specific road. Right before our eyes, in our own lifetime, a complete legend has come into being here, out of nothing, out of pure storytelling. And that's the lesson. We like to believe that ghost stories belong to old, dark times, to the superstition of peasants who didn't know any better. We think we're past it, but the truth is, we are still doing it. We are doing it right now in this very moment, with smartphones in our hands, with a sat-nav on the dashboard. We fill the dark, empty places of our world with figures, because an empty, dark forest is apparently more unbearable to us human beings than a forest with a ghost in it. Better a dead woman who waves than 90 square kilometers of blackness in which there's nothing and no one waiting. And this is where things come together. Always ask first who's telling the story and why. With this Strigoi, it was the village that couldn't let go of its dead. With Vlad, it was the printers and kings. With Bathory, it was a Jesuit 100 years later. And with the White Lady of the Ebersberg Forest, it's us. All of us. Every shared clip, every comment, every nightly drive that slows down level with the chapel. And the next time you're driving along a long, straight, lonely forest road at night, and at its edge a pale figure stands in the fog and waves, remember this. In all probability, it's only fog. It's only a post, only your tired brain shaping a woman out of nothing. In all probability, not with certainty. And with that, we've reached the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm curious, do you know a road like this from your own corner of the world? A chapel, a figure that everyone tells stories about but no one really has ever seen? Write in the comment. Maybe it'll become an episode of its own. Until then, sleep well. And if you're driving through the forest at night, don't stop. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and please pass the channel along. I'll be back for you very soon. As always, take good care of yourselves. Your friend, Chris.